Nuff Clipper, hi friends, Darth Momo here, and today we're going to talk about Tales of the Jedi. So that obviously won't be too long. There's not too much to say about Tales of the Jedi, it's pretty short. I enjoyed half of Tales of the Jedi. You almost got to kind of break it down into two sections, right? So let's talk about the Dooku stuff. I loved the Dooku stuff. Definitely a great exploration into his character, and I just think he's a really interesting character when you actually explore him. I know the prequels didn't really get a lot of time to go into that, but the Clone Wars gave a little bit more, and I think this just adds a lot of nuance. I read the Dooku Jedi Lost book, and I really love the depth that added to the character. I know Master and Apprentice dabbled a little bit with that, but obviously he wasn't the main focus of that book. I think that as far as the continuity goes, it's not the cleanest continuity with Dooku Jedi Lost, and because the new canon has established he left the Jedi Order around 8 years before the Phantom Menace, which to me makes sense. If he has never met Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Obi-Wan Kenobi was Qui-Gon Jinn's Padawan for years before the Phantom Menace, I don't think there's any way that Dooku and him could not have met if he was a Jedi up until the Phantom Menace. That being said, they don't really outright say that he's a Jedi or that he's not a Jedi. And I heard that, I don't remember if it was another book or if it was the Dooku Jedi Lost book. I think it might have been that Obi-Wan Padawan book they did recently, but I heard that established that Dooku occasionally did visit the Jedi Order, and he was on good terms with them. Which, if you know all that, I don't think it's hard to mesh that with the Tales of the Jedi presentation, especially that third episode of his, where he fights Yaddle. But if you don't know all that, I think you'd very clearly believe that he was still a Jedi, which I think is a little problematic, but I can give that one a pass. Overall, there's not much to say about the Dooku stuff other than I loved it. I love seeing Qui-Gon again. I love seeing Dooku. I love everything about Dooku and the planting seeds of his idealistic break from the Jedi. And I thought it did a lot of justice to the character. If I was ranking just the Dooku stuff alone, I'd give it a 9 out of 10. But we have the Ahsoka stuff. Ahsoka was a character I feel like this didn't need to explore. There were so many other Jedi in the prequel era. Further back, I heard Tar Vizsla as a possible candidate for Season 2 of Tales of the Jedi. Tar Vizsla would have been really interesting to explore. You could go in the original trilogy, the Dark Times era. You could go in the sequel trilogy era. You do an episode about Luke and Ben. You could do post-Rise of Skywalker. You could do the Dark Times. There's so many other background prequel era Jedi you could have done. And they chose the Jedi that's arguably had the most exposure. I know Darth Vader's like the main character of Star Wars, but I would almost argue that Ahsoka's gotten more featuring and exposure. At least she rivals Anakin and Obi-Wan. And that's who they chose to do. And I think it just created problems. The first Ahsoka episode felt kind of needless. We didn't need to see it. And in a series that was so short, I would have preferred something more memorable. I mean, it was okay. It was an enjoyable episode. And I would probably say it was the better of the three, but it was slower and not that exciting and not that interesting as far as character depth and character analysis went, especially when compared to the Dooku stuff. Ahsoka's middle episode with the Clone Wars training, that felt like a weaker episode. I mean, I love the Clone Wars, and I love seeing all those Clone Wars elements, but it felt kind of weak in the sense of, like, it was just a couple different collages of a couple moments throughout the war, and it just felt like it was almost like hinging on the Clone Wars. It wasn't able to stand on it as its own thing like the other episodes did. So for that, I've got to give that one a lower score too. It just, if it wasn't for the Clone Wars nostalgia and the Clone Wars references and callbacks, I don't think that would be a good episode. The only thing I do like about it is the idea that Anakin basically taught her how to survive Order 66. I like that. As far as the third episode went, that just felt disrespectful. I read the Ahsoka book. It's still sitting on my bookshelf. I enjoyed the Ahsoka book, and this felt like a needless retcon of that. And they won't even clarify if they did retcon it or not. All we have is Dave going, well, it's the same story, essentially. But if it's the same story, why did you feel the need to retcon it? Like, I get you only had 15 to 20 minutes. You didn't have time to do the whole book. I understand that. They could have adapted it, but they just used completely different characters. These are established characters. These are characters in this book that have appeared in other content in the canon expanded universe, and instead we just decided to basically retcon them out of existence, and we don't even explain who they are. It's just random people, a random Inquisitor. We have no idea who he is. The credits didn't even list him as a specific Inquisitor, and I think Dave kind of knew what he was doing, and he just went with it anyway. And I feel like it's even worse because he signed off on the book. He gave the notes to the author, he signed off on the book, and then he overrode it anyway. And it's just this trend of Dave Filoni's where he just overwrites the expanded universe content, and I don't care for that. And I don't appreciate that as a fan who, yeah, I don't keep up with it as much as a lot of other people do. I don't really read the comics anymore. I don't have the time or the money to give to that. I skip about every other book. I've only probably read about half the canon books, but that's still, I mean, I've got a 24-inch shelf width bookshelf, and I've got 2 shelves entirely devoted to Star Wars books. I read that stuff from time to time, and it felt disrespectful to me as a fan who read that, and he just said, nah. And it's not the first time he's done it either. And I think because of that, it's just an episode that was bad. I didn't like it. I thought it was bad. And even as its own thing, if the book, setting the book aside, it felt rushed. She just like, no, I'm done. I don't want to be part of this war. Understandably so. And then in just a few minutes, she's just like, oh, an Inquisitor's back. Okay, I'm in. Like, what? What was the whole point of her being like, no, I'm done. I don't want to be involved, etc. And then, okay, I'm back. It felt rushed. That's why I think this is probably the one instance where I think the book supersedes the on-screen material as what's truly canon. And if they come out and say that the book's retconned, so be it. You know, they already retconned the Clone Wars flashbacks in the book with the Clone Wars, but those were just flashbacks, so I was more willing to give those a pass. But I think this is the case where if I'm asked what I think the true canon story is, it's the Ahsoka book, except for the flashbacks. In the flashback case, I'd take the Clone Wars material. Yeah, so as far as Tales of the Jedi go, I'm going to give it probably a 7 out of 10. If it was just the Dooku stuff alone, 9 out of 10. If it was just the Ahsoka stuff alone, I'd give it a 4 out of 10. So we're going to balance that with a 7 out of 10. That being said, thank you for my brief review discussion joining in of Tales of the Jedi. The next one I'm going to discuss is the Bad Batch Season 2. Thank you for joining in. Darth Momo out, and may the Force be with you, always. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. If you liked the video, comment down below and hit that like button. Oh, and check out some of my other videos. I'm sure you'll find them delight.